Hello, everybody. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Before we get into live games today, I'm going to review a bit of a game that occurred yesterday, but also play it out to finish, as it was a game that I won on resignation, but I feel would be informative and helpful and educational for me to play out all the way to finish. I had the white pieces, and these are sort of normal English opening ideas, pawn formations. This one occurs sometimes. Yes, so this is just one of it's almost an opening trap. It earns white about a pawn. Once my opponent has made the move back to once my opponent makes the move knight to f6, it's just retreating the knight. A forward way of playing would have the knight on f2, or possibly, the knight would go to f2 here, and white would lose a pawn and a rook against black's knight and bishop, which is even. But knight to f6 is slightly inferior because white has the opportunity to pounce on e5 with knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d4, and a fork between black's two minor pieces. He's going to catch up that piece and be one pawn for the better. No, black chose a good move, and now instead of being one pawn for the better, white is simply even in material, though has some serious attacking possibilities as well as excellent control of the center. So I'm favoring white in this position quite a bit. Knight to c6, hitting at the queen. She finds a good square to occupy, get out of attack, and from here, queen to e3 is fine, right? There's nothing all too wrong with queen to e3 except why block in my dark squared bishop? Queen to d3 blocks in the light squared bishop a bit, but this bishop's job is mostly on the d1 to h5 diagonal. The queen shuffles over to g3, and now white has attacking chances, perhaps exploiting the pinned pawn on g7. That's one idea. Another idea is to put a strong pin on the knight at f6. So there's some good attacking opportunities on the king's side. And black's move, king to h8, makes things more direct, more obvious. We're going to go for the pin now, since there's no pin. Well, the knight pin now, since there's no pin against the g7 pawn. The knight is pinned to the queen, and white continues with some aggressive moves. Some of these require accurate play from black, and knight takes c7 may not be computer best, but it does make very clear that there's a fork, so white will be ahead material at least. The way the order of these captures here favors white, who's up a full bishop. So we reduce material by capturing on c6. And giving up the b pawn, mostly because I can get really helpful trade in on the e file. My opponent chose to play differently. Rook b7 is a decent move, but rook to e8, and then we'll have the trade of rooks on the e file here. Instead, my opponent captured the knight captured the bait on c7, and then of course just rook takes f8, checkmate. We're going to allow things to go back a bit here and play against the computer from this moment forward. It's about the right amount of advantage on the progress bar that even with my human level of play, I might be able to defeat the computer on maximum. So let's see if we learned anything interesting as a result. Okay, now we see this knight is very powerful where he is. Except c5 lets the bishop into d5. So this is now... yeah, this is now in take-back territory. I didn't get it against the computer purely. That doesn't mean we can't still learn things from playing. The problem with c5 is it allows black bishop d5 supported by a pawn, but even worse in this case, because of the coming move, rook takes g2 check, king goes to f1, h1 would be disaster because of a discovered attack. So king goes to f1 and it's not good, and then move back to e6 perhaps and capture on h3. This is not good for white. So instead of c5, we'll find a better move for white to play. There might be something quite solid about king h2. King h2. Computer likes king h2. All right. So why bishop f4? We know that black's going to play g5. Bishop has to move again. That's the point. We are going to induce a weakening of black's kingside pawn structure by playing bishop to f4. Black can't let this bishop stay there all day and night, very strong in the position where he is. That's not tenable from a positional standpoint for chess. So pawn to g5 kicks the bishop and then incurs this kind of just long-lasting weakness in and around black's king, huddled over here in the corner. And we haven't figured out where yet we're going to put that bishop, but it's not going to be e5. It's not going to be e3 or e2 or d2. Doesn't leave many possibilities. So we're going to put the bishop at c1. It's the only good move. It's the only good move. Mostly I'm impressed by the strength of g5, I guess. I don't know. Maybe. The white's weakness, or not even weakness, but liability lay in the fact that the c4 pawn is stuck there. The moment that pawn moves to make a great outpost for the knight is the moment that bishop d5 occurs, and that's going to be a nightmare on the king's side, on white's portion of the board. White has a lot of options though. I'm weighing a lot of options here. Pawn to h4 could induce g4, which blocks some of black's bishop's scope, and so is not all that bad in that respect. And it adds another pawn on a dark square where our opponent's bishop occupies light squares. And then again, there's g takes h4, g takes h4, and that's a freeing move a bit for white's king, with now the safe and slightly more active square g3 available for venture. We'll try that. We'll try pawn to h4. Right? Computer said it was okay. Didn't knock any socks off, but didn't, mess it all up either. I think it's now, or maybe last move, but maybe we can still get at it now, to address what is white going to do to address this issue on the C file and the D file about midway through the board. One idea, rook a3. There's not much black can do to stop rook e3. Then black's rook either scurries over to this attacking point at c2, or maybe a slightly safer square at a2. But we're gaining some more squares, and I think it's just stronger that way. We don't have to capture here. In a blitz game, you might play the natural move h takes g5, and black will play usually h takes g5, but king takes g5 could be calculated as well. This doesn't help white. That leaves white with doubled pawns on the g file that are actually quite bad, mostly because the base is not mobile, and my opponent's bishop and rook can center on it in a way that's not that easy to defend because it's of opposite square color to my bishop. So the capturing h takes g5 here will be a positional blunder, or maybe a mistake. Whatever it would be bad. So we just delay it, because if my opponent initiates the capture, well then g takes h4 isn't all that bad. Under certain types of duress, you might move pawn from g2 to g3 to protect it, and then the king's protecting the base. It's not so bad. So with all that in mind, I'll play rook to a3. Okay. White's almost in trouble, which means he's not actually in trouble. Rook to a3, but then bishop now to e3 because of black's response. And we're out of trouble with the bishop. Black has to take a tempo of initiative to take time out to play pawn to a5. And as a result, black isn't doing all that better or worse than before. I'm thinking that I can play bishop to b6. right now my thoughts are that white's rook on a3 is not doing all that much. Guarding this pawn on a4 is not the main priority in a position this active. Yes, I know this rook could skirt to c3 or b3, anywhere, almost anywhere along this third rank. And yes, I know that that leaves white open to rook to a2, and then maybe captures on a4, but this all looks a little bit too slow to me. So the squares away from a4 hit up against resistance from white pieces. So in order to get out of the way of the a5 pawn and start a promotion threat going, the rook is then having to go, the rook then must go either to a2 and slide along, or to a1 and slide along somewhere along the back rank or along the second rank. So this promote threat becomes a bit too slow, which means maybe the rook on a3 can be repositioned in a way advantageous for white. At this moment I don't see the continuation quite yet to justify moving that rook. There's always exchanges on the G file to consider. So you look at this position, there's no sacrifice immediately available. There's no, you've got one down the board to, who's gonna queen first in a promotion race. It's not there. This is a type of position though that, I believe many strong players would think about for a long time. Sometimes if you're looking at this, if you're in time trouble and you want to attack this position, you might try rook to c3, with the idea that if rook a2, then rook a3, and your opponent might try something a little bit risky. But like I said, I'm not or maybe I'm saying now, I'm not committed to rook to c3 yet. Something subtle. Does the bishop need to be at c5? Is there a waiting move that helps? Like rook to a1. I'll go with that because it's best move. So, Bad mistake. Oh, this looks like a pretty difficult, a quite difficult uh, one end game. I lean on some hints for this one. Alright, this is a reasonably complicated techno endgame. White has a small material lead, so I'm just going to hint this one through, and then we'll head on to our next live game. Alright, I'll probably walk the king over all the way back to the pawn and then try to overwhelm. White might have a draw here instead of a win. Let's go back a while. Um, just want to get the. Keep the pawns separated there. Now we're learning. Now we are learning. Just a quick moment here. Zugzwang. King to b6 uh, forces a decision from black to play either to d5 or to d7. And in either event, white's going to force black to make a turn on black's move that black does not want to make. After king to d7, then bishop to f5 check forces the king away from defense of his pawn. He's occupying a square at d7. The king has c7. The pawn and the bishop both have c6. This king goes someplace undesirable and white captures on c6. I said c6, I meant c5 with the white pawn. So that's one entry. The other entry is probably slightly more. I don't know why. It just appeals a little bit more. Who knows why? Uh, King to D5, and uh, all we have to do here is say if we pull back to G3, keep it maintaining some protection there for help. I guess it's not actually necessary, but the bishop moves to a square that isn't all that big of a deal. And he has 2 such squares available, and 3 such squares total that he can move back to E3 if he wants to. Um, Once we do that, bishop G1, then the king may not enter onto this square for the point of the um, pawn on C5. The king cannot enter on C6. That should be very clear. And the D4 square is still under control of the bishop. If back here, if you're going to make this move, but you want to say, hey, maybe I'll waste a point of time by going to H6 and then I could go here or whatever, that doesn't help as much. This pawn to H6 leads to king to D4. He's still struggling to try to put pressure behind eliminating white's C5 pawn. Black would love to see both C pawns eliminated. That's a draw. A bishop and a king against a king cannot. This is just a draw. This is not enough material to force checkmate by the side with the bishop, or either side, really. So we pull back to G1. It's a little bit of zugzwang. The king's forced away. And then king takes C6 is the end of it. This is all. It's all good for white here. Okay, so that was our first game of the day. That was with a lot of help from hints. So I'm not even all that invested in the accuracy of that game. And some of it was just kind of weird to me, how the technical part. But right around, I said something like, now we're learning. I started learning about an endgame that might occur again, of course. Notice here, I'm kind of toot my own horn. Rook to G1 check. This is the best move, but why? Why would Rook to G1 be the best move? Our best move? And that the response is Rook to G4. So it's just they're going to trade rooks. And here the key is make black force the trade. This rook can't go very far or anywhere useful for black until this trade is made one way or another. I guess the king could wander. Would have been better choices. But frankly, here where the computer trades on G1, black could do better. I capture on G1. If black, let's put it this way, if black is able to force white to initiate the trade, then all of a sudden black has 2 connected passed pawns on the king's side, and they're going places. This bishop isn't slowing them down also greatly. The king can centralize and maybe work to a point where he can support one advance or another. This is a detail thing. So I'm glad to see this in my own play with Rook G1. I know not to initiate the exchange on G4 here. The difference, very importantly, being connected passed pawns versus isolated passed pawns, okay? The isolated passed pawns are much easier for most pieces to target and eliminate. And so the king's slightly more passive, but big whoop. We kind of pick apart these pawns one by one, and then protect our only pawn. One other like main top level thing to know about pretty much this position onward is that your pawn is your lifeline. If you're playing as white for a win, this pawn is your lifeline. You're not going to win without it. So however you move the bishop and the king, and maybe later on the pawn, whatever that is, or if it becomes something, that pawn has to either be alive and healthy, or able to be promoted soon, or already promoted. Right? The bishop can't do it. Insufficient material, and the pawn. So I might be stuck in sort of like a more basic level teaching mode here. Let's go on and play another game of chess. My next win will be my last game of this session, and I will probably review it. Okay. It's a great game. That was one of my better games. Let's review this game. I had the black pieces. It's called the center game, and then this is the center game. Okay, Queen F6 here is mostly nothing crazier than threatening to attack White's king on move 6. It's not a. It won't immediately make checkmate because White's king can move to d2, but he's already in some kind of trouble. Had to move from the center spot and is on a file that is already half open. The queen's behind it, so if a rook gets over here, whoops. If a rook gets over here to the d file and this pawn is gone somehow, you know, then that could be tactics. But there's a ton of tactics. F3 isn't the greatest way to solve those tactics. Here as white, you can't allow F2 to be captured with check. I would suggest the move bishop to E3. Bishop to E3, and that blocks part of the attack. It protects the it protects the attacked square a second time. And it's just a strong move. Of course, white is doing poorly already. Even with bishop to E3, black has bishop takes B2, attacking, we're threatening to capture a full rook. Things are getting crazy real early here. So, knowing that, let's see what Torch 4 suggests. Knight to F4. Still not the most fun move to make as white. Still not the most fun move. We push pawn to G5. Then we might have some extra material on our hands as black. If he moves out of the way, maybe he'll move to H3. Okay, now it's coming to life because knight to H3 also protects the pawn at F2. I could try to, get there in a hurry with a move like D6 or even D5 and undermine that defense, but by the time I've done that, you might as well bring a bishop out. You might as well put your queen on E2 to help, and things are looking fine for white after knight to F4. And F3 is the second best move, so not a horrible move at all. F3, knight to F4 is not a natural move either, and it requires some calculation. So my opponent played a strong move as strong as was available anyway, with pawn to f3. Yeah, knight to e5. My intention is, in a lot of moves are gonna have black simply capturing on f3 with check, with recaptures, queen captures on f3, and then there's like the idea of too many balls in the air. I've gained 2 pawns for this knight. My queen on f3 is attacking a rook. This knight is being attacked, although he's pretty darn secure as it is. The queen is threatening things on, like with queen to f2 check. There's bishop to f2 check in some situations. There's bishop to f2 checkmate in certain variations. So white has really seen himself crumble in the early goings here. And then knight to d2 is, and I made a great move here. This is a great move as well. I'm glad to have spied this. Knight to d2 leaves not only the king vulnerable to certain attacks, not only the king vulnerable to certain attacks, white's king is vulnerable to attack, but also the possibility of the queen being smothered. She can't move right now, so there's certain lines where the queen gets smothered, including as in the game. So let's hop along here. I found a way to repair the smothered queen mate, or this smothered attack on the queen, and that was with bishop f2 check. You know, the knight is hanging in the balance, but it's checked, so the king has to move, and soon enough the king is forced to choose between a square he can't go, squares he can go, a square he can't go to, so not actually choosing between those, and squares like d3 and c3, which no matter what it is, the queen's going to be captured. If the queen moves, she's captured. So yeah, all right, we get this. All right, good. Then let's watch this progress from here. White loses the queen, and then it's a king hunt. A king hunt. And it's nice to see the pawn getting some recognition for being the piece to finish the checkmate. All right, folks. Well, by the way, I am also More Gravity on YouTube. So I'm More Gravity on chess.com, on twitch.tv, and on YouTube. If you want to check out my other videos, I have some Halo videos on there, mostly Halo 4. I have Mario videos. I speedrun Mario games. Sort of a mix of different video games. I have Bioshock on both YouTube and Twitch. It's 17 hours long, or about 16 hours and 40 minutes. It's my greatest gaming feat or achievement or accolade. As you don't have to hear it from me. You can hear it from old me. I am More Gravity on twitch.tv. I am More Gravity on YouTube. I am More Gravity on chess.com. That's More Gravity, MORE GRAVITY. More Gravity, MORE GRAVITY. All right, and you'll know if you do check out my YouTube, you'll see that I'm sometimes known as Jay Wild, JWILD, all caps, no hyphen though that might change, but yeah, I'm More Gravity, MOREGRAVITY. All right, thank you so much thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm More Gravity. Have a great night.